Oh, more than a dozen states are now considering bills meant to crack down on certain types of protests on public property. It comes as millions of people across the country have, of course, taken to the streets to protest President Trump and his policies. And as social media makes it easier to organize very quickly. Now lawmakers in 18 states have introduced measures that include banning protesters from wearing masks amid increasing punishments for protests that do turn violent or for protesters who block traffic. Supporters say we need a way to stop violent demonstrations. Opponents say the laws would infringe on our right of free assembly and stifle political dissent. Joining us, David Bruno, a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor and trial attorney, and Rachel Self, a trial attorney. Welcome to you both. David, let me start with you. Is this appropriate?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, the First Amendment is not absolute in its protection of a person's right to protest. And our United States Supreme Court has said that the government is allowed to regulate as long as it's content neutral and in time, place, and manner. And
but what regulation is like what? Where you can be, how many you can be, they put up barriers and this sort of thing. The critics say this goes much further than that.
Yeah, let's start with they could regulate against violence. They could regulate against a person obstructing traffic. There is no First Amendment protection for those activities. And that is a lot. There are a lot of bills being sent up, and that's the majority, is the protection of traffic, commerce, transportation, and the economy. And those are all lawful.
But Rachel, some would say, aren't there already laws on the books now? If you block traffic or if you resist arrest, for example.
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. As a red-blooded American, hearing talk like this freaks me out. I'm interested in less government regulation, not more government regulation, especially when that government regulation is trying to regulate thoughts and ideas. They might blanket it under this thinking that, oh, we're trying to protect the streets or we're trying to protect traffic, but there are already laws on the books that do that. It's a crime to block traffic. It's a crime to trespass. To do this will have a chilling effect, and it will absolutely not pass constitutional muster because the First Amendment makes very clear that Congress shall pass no law abridging free speech, the press, or people's rights to peacefully assemble and petition the government and advise them of their grievances. And that's what this is trying to do here. And to try to say that it's anything else is outrageous.
Well, Rachel,
and this doesn't just make my doesn't just make my spidey sense tingle. It blows the roof off of it.
Well, for example, what are you most concerned about? One of the laws, for example, would prohibit masks, face masks. And we saw a lot of arrests in Washington, D.C. of people who dressed in the black. Another one, for example, would expel students if they're involved in violent protests. So, Rachel, what's your reaction to those two?
So, my reaction to the one that would expel students is that schools have their own code of conduct, and if somebody has actually broken a law, then they're convicted of breaking that law, then the school can enforce its code of conduct as it seems fit. There's a reason these bills are also dying on the legislation floor, and it's because a lot of our legislators in Virginia just died a couple of weeks ago trying to do this. It's because our legislators realize that we're still living in America and that it's not appropriate to be trying to regulate thoughts and ideas, which is what this is.
Yeah, Eric, listen, just because there is a law out there that exists that prohibits the obstruction of traffic does not mean it's serious enough. And that is not a good argument from the left. The fact of the matter is our governments are able to make amendments to these laws to deal with them appropriately. And what's on the books is not effective, apparently, because this is a problem in all of the states across the United States.
But David,
it's absolutely effective. It's absolutely effective.
How is it effective?
Hundreds of thousands of women marched on Washington a couple of weeks ago, and not a single arrest was made because there was no violence. If people behave inappropriately, there are ways for the police to handle that. They can charge them with a crime. They can arrest them. They can punish them appropriately. To start to allow police to go out there and say, oh, well, I don't like the look of this. I don't like the thoughts that are being passed here. I don't like what these people are saying. They're being a little loud with their thoughts here and their voices. Let's lock them up. We are going down a very slippery slope.
Supporters of this, Rachel, would say, being loud isn't part of the statutes. They're talking about other type of violent situations. And that 200 some odd protesters have been indicted in the District of Columbia, some very controversially, over some violence that did occur during the inauguration.
Yeah, during the inauguration, violence absolutely occurred because people were protesting the inauguration. But when hundreds of thousands of people are allowed to peacefully assemble, as the Women's March did in D.C. a couple weeks ago, and not a single arrest is made, that shows you that this is something that is absolutely working. And it's a fundamental right to the tenets of our democracy to be able to petition the government of your grievances and do so peacefully. And if you start to regulate this or give the police the right to regulate it, you're letting the police into your thoughts and ideas, and I'm just grateful our founding fathers were as smart as they were to protect us from this sort of baloney.
So, David, how do you think this will roll out? I mean, there's some challenges around the states. What do you think will happen?
Yeah, and it will be challenged, and that's why we have a court system, and there's checks and balances. The legislators pass the bills, the executive branch makes the law, and the judges, they analyze it from a constitutional protection standpoint. And yes, there are some bills that are probably going to be struck down, like the masks. I don't agree with that. I think that is overbroad, and I think that will be unconstitutional. But when you talk about obstruction of traffic or violence on our police officers or other protesters, that is going to be lawful.
David and Rachel.
Absolutely, and it's already illegal to do that. So it's already illegal to do that.
Unfortunately for you, sorry.
Well, that's the argument, and that's the debate right now, and it is the debate that's going to go on not just in legislatures, but obviously in courts and I think appeal courts around the country over the next few months.
And the First Amendment will protect everyone, which is great.
All right, Rachel and David, thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
Of course.
Bye.
Uma?
Well, lots of people today.